Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Right. I think we'll get started if that's okay. So hello and welcome everyone to London Wildlife Trust's Festival of the Great North Wood. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Frantic, Clamour of Spring and Nature Writing Workshop. My name's Andrew Wright. I'm the Great North Wood Project Manager, and Chantal Lindsay, who isn't here today, is the Great North Wood Project Officer. I'm just going to say a few words about the Great North Wood, and then I'm going to pass you over to Amanda and Jane for the session. So I won't take too much of your time. The Great North Wood Project is a 4-year project that began in 2017 and ends in June 2021. It's funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund with further support from the Mayor of London, Viola Environmental Trust, the Dulwich Estate and the Dulwich Society. The project focuses on South London's ancient Great North Wood landscape, which once stretched for several miles between Thames and Croydon. It spans 5 South London boroughs: Southwark, Lewisham, Lambeth, Bromley and Croydon. For centuries, it was at the heart of a thriving woodland economy and was managed for timber, including shipbuilding, charcoal, tanning for Bermondsey's leather making industry, as well as firewood. The Industrial Revolution and the Enclosures Acts from the late 18th century onwards led to the Great North Wood losing its economic validity, and much of it was partitioned and sold off for housing development. As you can see, the map on the left is a 16th century depiction of the landscape, and on the right is a more up-to-date depiction. Today, the wood consists of a series of small woodlands, parks, cemeteries, sports grounds, railway embankments and gardens, all of which provide a home for nature within a modern urban landscape. This third map shows the 13 key Great North Wood sites the project focuses on, but not exclusively, as we do sometimes work on surrounding sites and those in between. The project focuses on woodland restoration through a volunteering programme and community engagement, which aims to reconnect the Great North Wood sites in people's minds and encourage them to recognise its value for both people and wildlife. If you'd like to volunteer with us or find out more, please drop us an email or refer to the email you'll receive after the event. Usually our annual festival takes place at one of our Great North Wood sites, but due to COVID, we've moved the festival online. So we invite you to celebrate the Great North Wood with us and connect with nature through a wide variety of live workshops, talks, film screenings and wellbeing sessions. Please do check out the rest of the festival lineup, as there are plenty of free tickets left. Just before we begin, I'll just do a bit of housekeeping for the session. So the session is being recorded so that it can be accessed on YouTube at a later date. So usually it's just the hosts who are visible on the recording, but if you're still not comfortable with that, please turn off your camera. If you could please keep yourself muted whilst not speaking to avoid any background noise. And please let us know via the chat if the screen freezes or you can't hear at any point. Pop any questions in the chat and I'll bring them to the host's attention, and the session will end at 5:30 p.m. Live captions have also been turned on for this session. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to the Great North Wood nature writer in residence, Amanda Tuke, and Jane Adams, a Dorset nature writer. Thank you so much for giving us your time, Amanda and Jane. I'll hand over to you now.
Wonderful. Thank you. So just bear with me while I share my screen with you. Fantastic. Welcome everybody. Delighted to see you all here, and there's some familiar faces. There's definitely some people who came to the workshop I ran last December, so it's great to have you back again. And I see we've got some increasing number of people from the other side of the Atlantic, so welcome to all of you as well. It's fantastic to have you here. Hopefully one day you'll have a chance to visit the Great North Wood, perhaps next time you're in London. Definitely worth doing. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with what we're going to do. So I'm just going to talk you through the plan for the session today. We're going to start off by doing 3 fairly short writing exercises. We're not making any assumptions about that you've had writing experience in the past, so it's entirely open to wherever you are in your writing journey. We're then going to have a 5 to 10 minute break, so that you can get away from the computer screen for a bit. And then after that, we're going to have a slightly longer writing exercise before we finish off. And then the plan is to finish at 5:30. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Let me start off by saying, well, you've all signed up for a workshop to do nature writing. Some of you may be very familiar with the idea of nature writing. But for those of you who are new to it, by nature writing, we mean it in its widest sense. So creative could be non-fiction, could be fiction, could be prose, could be poetry, but it's nearly always writing about the natural world and often the writer's place in the natural world. And it can be anything from book length to tweet length. So there's a huge range of things that are called nature writing. But one thing that compelling nature writing often offers us is a unique view, the writer's view on something either very familiar in nature or sometimes something completely unfamiliar, but that the writer knows about. But it does usually avoid those expressions that we hear over and over again, cliches, in other words. And we're going to do quite a bit of thinking today about cliches. So just to start off with, and this is take this in a sort of light-hearted way. There's a piece of writing here by a fictional writer. When I say fictional, I don't mean a fiction writer. I mean somebody who doesn't exist. Everly Hackneyed, here she is. So this is a piece of writing that the lovely Everly Hackneyed, which I've become quite bonded to Everly Hackneyed as time has gone by. So this is some of her early nature writing. What I'd like you to have a go doing, look through this, have a think about where the cliches that are in this. There are lots of things in this bit of writing that you will read over and over and over again every time somebody tweets about nature or writes anything about nature. What I'd like you to have a go doing, if you're using a piece of paper, then I suggest listing them down the left-hand side. Have a go writing down the cliches that you can spot in this. And then if you have time, on the right-hand side, see if you can work out a different way that Everly could have said those things, something a little bit more imaginative, more creative, and less cliched. So you are going to have, you have about 6 or 7 minutes to do that exercise. So just to get you warmed up. Can I ask that you make sure that you're all muting yourselves, please? So you have about a minute left. Okay, so hopefully that was quite fun playing around with those, and also hopefully it's warmed you up a little bit. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Jane for the next exercise or the next part. Jane, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me? I can't hear you now.
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
All right, that's probably enough. Okay, so hopefully everybody else can hear me as well. So thumbnail nature. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Amanda actually came up with this name. I hadn't heard it anywhere else. It's an ultra short piece of nature writing. So think of something about 40 or 50 words, or if you are a Twitter user, think of the length of a tweet, so 280 characters for those in the know. I'm going to read out a few examples of thumbnail nature, and you'll see how much you can pack into 40 or 50 words. So you don't have to be writing an essay when you're thinking about nature writing. You can literally be doing something as short as this. So as you'll see, the first one is actually written by me. To give you a bit of context of this one, I am actually a badger vaccinator, vaccinating badgers against TB as well. So this is called Vaccination Day. Vaccination Day. The clinical smell of the mask transports me to a dawnlit wood, wet boots, and the wary eyes of a caged badger, her weight nearly over. One step closer to herd immunity. I hold out my hand, my arm. Now that was actually written just after I'd been for my first COVID jab. So if you sort of think about nature writing, it doesn't have to be all about nature. It can be your sort of place in nature. So it struck me that day that I was in that same sort of circumstance that the poor badgers are, that are when I'm vaccinating them, that they're sitting there very sort of worried, don't know what's going to happen. And myself and the badger are both hopefully going to be getting herd immunity in order to be safe. So think about it in different ways. You'll also notice in that I used smell. I used wet boots. So, you know, the sort of the feel of wet, and also what I was seeing. So don't think of it just as being something that you see. Think of all your senses. Try and bring everything into it. So the next one is by Helen Jones, and this is more of a tongue-in-cheek. So, a forest glade, thick with honeyed sunbeams. Bees lazily hum and bob on the breeze. A deer and her fawn rest softly amongst moss cushions. Nature, trademark, yours for $29.99 a month. Not actual footage, terms and conditions apply. So I think with that one, it really shows you that you don't have to be deadly serious all the time. It doesn't have to be, you know, a sort of a work of art that you're thinking about. It can be something light-hearted, and that one is light-hearted, but actually it has got a deep meaning to it. So nature, we forget sometimes that nature's completely free to us. We're not having to pay for it. are we sort of taking it for granted too much? I don't know what Helen was thinking when she wrote it, but that's what I feel when I read that. So think how you can sort of, you can do things in a, as Amanda has said, have a twist to it. So the next one is by James Gilbert. Light rain falls from ashen sky onto pantile roofs. They look slick, shine dark, like the starlings that walk down them, probing moss-lined furrows from apex to eave. The bird's fast-mannered forage causes moss to loosen, pieces tumble down and collect in gutters, soon to overflow. So that, I think that's a beautifully sort of described thumbnail nature. Another thing that I haven't said about is think about the words that you're using. So if you go back to my one, you'll notice that I used wet boots, wary eyes, and wood. So there was a W going through it. And one thing that we always suggest when you're writing something, when you've written it, actually say it out loud. Now you might get a bit sort of, you might think that's a bit weird, but actually things sound totally different when you say them out loud than when you're saying them in your head. So it's a really, really good thing to get in a habit of doing is saying it out loud. And you'll actually feel when you're reading it how it flows. And you'll notice where maybe you've used, you know, a different, that using a different word would have been better. So just think about that. But you'll see in James, this one, you know, you've got this lovely probing moss-lined furrows. I mean, it just sounds lovely when you're saying it. Apex to eaves. I mean, even that, it just sounds beautiful when you're saying it. And then you've got fast-mannered forage. And that actually sort of makes you think, you can imagine the starlings sort of foraging, sort of the actual words are quite dippy. So they're sort of fast-mannered forage. So all those sort of things make you sort of think about how the piece that you're writing is flowing. So I've left out Amanda's, the very last one. A monstrous grunt, then ominous silence. I peek around the comforting oak trunk. 5 meters away, my vapor puffing pursuer lowers himself onto bronzed bracken. Today's plant hunting in park, thwarted by a testosterone blinded red deer stag. So again, Amanda's used a slightly sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I love the way that she's had the peeking around the comforting oak trunk. So it's not just a trunk of a tree, it's comforting because actually it's protecting her. 5 meters away, you've got the vapor puffing pursuer. And you can see there with the peas, it sounds great when you're saying it out loud. Onto the bronzed bracken. So really think about the words that you're using. You want those words to sort of make other people imagine what you were seeing. So, and Amanda's going to hate this because I'm going off script, because I've actually got one more that I want to really quickly read out loud, which is from a book called Wild Women Swimming, which I told Amanda about the other day. Gazing up at the tree, I see a sprinkling of crab apples still clinging to the branches and looking against the greeny grey lichen like a fruity tiara on a tipsy granny at a barn dance. And I just love that, fruity tiara on a tipsy granny at a barn dance. How on earth does she have the imagination to be looking up at a crabapple tree and seeing these apples and be able to sort of come up with those words? I think that's just absolutely delicious. So that's just, I'm just wondering
how. You're forgiven, Jane. You're
forgiven. I'm within my time. I'm allowed. So really think about what you're writing and how you're writing it. How your writing can be, as Amanda was showing in that previous one, the cliches that are used over and over again. Think about different words for different things. So when you see something, you know, coming up with something like furrows from apex to eave, and tumbling and collecting in gutters soon to overflow. It's just thinking of those words which are going to give you a piece which is going to make people think, oh yeah, I've not thought of it like that before. Okay, Amanda, could we go on to the next slide, please? So you have another little writing exercise. Before you came along, hopefully, most of you will have done the pre-activity. It doesn't matter if you haven't, but if you have, we asked you to focus on sounds, natural and man-made. Try and go out as near to dawn as you possibly could, and think about the word harmonizing. So as we say, it doesn't matter if you didn't go out and weren't able to actually go out and sit in nature for 10 minutes, thinking about the word harmonizing. You can use that, the picture that Amanda has got on that slide, to actually come up with some, what you thought of when you thought of the word harmonizing. So we don't want you to come up with a finished piece or anything. We literally just want you to write down words, phrases, sentences. Don't worry about your grammar or your spelling. Don't edit it. So we're saying all the don'ts. And don't rewrite it as you go along, which is something that I do all the time because I find it really hard to actually just write things down without going back. But for this exercise, for 10 minutes, what we're going to, well, until 4:35. So yes, it is about 10 minutes. Think about that experience you had in nature. And if not, have a look at that picture and think about words inspired by your harmonizing experience. And I'll chip in a minute or so before the end. So just have a go at just writing anything down. Doesn't matter if it's a great long stream of consciousness, just write it all down. Okay, I'm going to mute myself while you're doing that. Right, so you've got a couple more minutes just to sort of come up with the last phrases that you can think of for harmonizing. Right, so I'm going to just hand you over back to Amanda for the next little exercise.
Okay, so now for something completely different. We want you to think about the second bit of the activity that we asked you to do for the pre-workshop. So we've talked about harmonizing, which is very much how people normally write about spring, you know, whether it's dawn choruses or etc., etc. But actually, I mean, as you'll have guessed probably from the title of this workshop, Frantic Clamour of Spring, that's really what spring's about. It's about competition. It's about fighting for mates. It's about fighting for nest holes. It's about, you know, or the natural world is very much about that. So we'd like you to do pretty much exactly the same thing you have just done thinking about harmonizing, but now through the lens of competing. So in that second period of time you spent in nature, listening to natural sounds and man-made sounds, where's the competing in that? Can you do the same thing, please? So words, phrases, sentences, and as Jane said in her introduction, try to not edit as you go along. Try to just get as much down as you can without thinking too much about what you're writing. Let it flow. You'll have plenty of time to think about editing later on in the session. So just for the moment, just get all of your ideas out of your head and onto the paper. If you didn't have the chance to spend time in nature, I've put the picture of a bird there that we have a lot of around here, ringneck parakeets. And they make their presence felt very, very clearly, and their idea of dawn chorus is quite different from what we used to have before they were here. So in case that inspires you, or if you didn't have the chance to spend time in nature, think about when you have been conscious of that sort of element of competition in nature. So we're going to do the same thing again. So you've got now about 8 minutes, and I'll do as Jane did and give you a sort of 1 or 2 minute warning as we get close to the end. So off you go. So you've got about a minute left. Okay, so if you could stop wherever you are. It's nearly time for a break, but just before we stop, so I was a bit hard about cliches earlier, because there are times when actually it's possible to use cliches deliberately and for effect. And so let's go back to Everly again. So Everly's been playing with cliches. So this was her idea for how you might use a cliche deliberately. Ahead of me lay an azure carpet of bluebells, or it would have done if they hadn't been systematically trampled by the boots of wild children. So one of the things while you have a break, and it's going to be about sort of 5 or 8 minutes, do feel free to share on the chat either your cliche fixes from exercise 1 or ideas for using cliches deliberately for effect. And in fact, lots of you have been sharing things already, so thank you very much for doing that, and that's great. So yeah, share any of those things or any phrases you've come up with you're particularly pleased with, and then we'll have a quick look when we return. So I'm going to turn off and mute now, and we're going to start again at 4:55. So see you then. Thanks.
Is it easier to talk, Amanda?
Yes, probably.
So
but presumably everyone can hear us, can't they?
I think so, yeah. So I think when you go to the bottom of the screen and things come up like
so I have those at the top of my screen, but yes.
Okay, sorry.
I think it's because I'm sharing.
Sorry, but we can hear you having that discussion. It's a little disturbing during the writing time.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Okay, I'll mute. Okay, so welcome back everybody. We're going to get going again. I'm going to hand over to Jane to just give us some feedback.
Right, I've been going through.
Finally managed to get captions.
Ah, we got the captions. Excellent.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I've been through a few of them. I've got some great ones come up actually. So Rumner said instead of a carpet of bluebells, and quite a few people have looked at the bluebell cliche and have come up with a banquet of bluebells. Vanessa said bonnets of bluebells. I quite liked the Alan wrote a little piece and he said the wind blowing the wrong way, and I really liked that, because how can the wind blow the wrong way? It's sort of got some, you know, it really makes you think when you hear that, but you sort of know what it means. Mellow morning rays, that was another one. That's from Kerry. So yeah, I really like all these, the way that people are thinking about it. And I quite liked, Kerry said she quite liked some of the cliches. And I don't think there is nothing wrong with cliches per se. I think it's maybe thinking when you're writing, whether you actually want to be writing the same things that you have heard over and over again. And you might actually like some of those things, but is there another way that you could actually say it that will make people think, yeah, that's a bit different. You know, that's made me think about something in a different way. I mean, I suppose what I mean is with Alan saying the wind blowing the wrong way, and you could just say the wind whispering, and there isn't anything wrong with that. But somehow saying the wind blowing the wrong way, it sort of makes you think differently about it. So I think it's what we're trying to get you to do is to really feel the experience that you have when you're in nature. So try and forget everything that you've ever read before, and think how you're experiencing it. And if you experience it in a funny way or a controversial or political way, then write that. You know, be quite blunt. It doesn't have to have loads of descriptive words in it. It can be quite simple. So I think that's what we're trying to get across, is that anything really goes with nature writing, and that's the great thing about it. So I'm going to hand over to Amanda for the next part. Oh, which is got a lovely.
Thank you, Jane.
And you've got a wonderful solitary bee as well.
I have. It's a Clark's mining bee. I'm reliably informed by bee experts, which is not me. So we've done lots of thinking about different ways of looking at spring and experiences in spring. So now for the final exercise, if we return to the subject of this, or the theme of this workshop, the frantic clamour of spring, what I'd like you to do is to create in the next 15 minutes, as far as you can, a 50-word or maximum 50-word piece of thumbnail nature. So I would encourage you to look back at what you've done so far. Think about, is there other things you've written there that you could use? Is there a way that you can make a little twist in your thumbnail nature so it ends in a place you weren't expecting it to when you started reading it? I would really encourage you to write it and then read it aloud. And then if you have time, start the process of editing and polishing and then read it aloud again. But see how you get on. So if for any reason, everything you've written so far, you hate it all, then by all means start again. There's no rules in this. The important thing is the theme and that it shouldn't be any longer than 50 words. So have fun. I'm going to mute now. So you've got about a minute left, everybody. Okay, so that's the end of that exercise. Just before I move on, if you do have, people are posting some lovely writing. If you do have any questions about anything we've been doing, please do shove them in the chat and we'll see if we can cover them before we finish. Just a bit of a recap of what we've been doing and what we've both been talking about today. So in terms of our top tips for compelling nature writing, I guess obviously there's loads of tips, but if we kind of reduced it to 3, we would really encourage you to root your writing in experiencing nature. You know, obviously any of us can sit in a room and imagine nature and nature experiences, but your writing will really benefit from time that you spend in nature and those direct experiences. And one of the ways that you can do that, so if you're not comfortable having a notepad outside to make notes, is to use one of those little voice recorders, which is what I have, and they actually have amazing sound. So you quite often have, you know, if you've got your recording, quite often have the bird song in the background, so it's picking up the sounds you're hearing as well, which can really add to that. And you can find free software which helps you transcribe recordings like that if you've not used that before. I use a website called Otter, which is, you're allowed to do 3 transcriptions a month, so you basically just upload your sound file and it converts it into words. You have to do a bit of editing, but it's not bad. But anyway, so yes, root your writing in experiencing nature, which is why we encouraged you to spend time in nature before you came to the workshop. The second tip would be to find a twist on the familiar. So there's been lots of discussion about cliches today. And yes, it's fine to use cliches sometimes. It's that sense of awareness and thinking about, is that the best way of saying something, or have you got something else tucked up your sleeve that you could share with the world? So finding a twist on familiar nature. We've been talking today about, you know, people have been writing about things like the fact that, you know, about dawn choruses, and so things that people might anticipate about spring. But you could write about something completely different. There's lots of ways of looking at spring, which don't necessarily, you know, might be something new that you can share with other people, and that's a great way of doing nature writing too. And then the final tip is something that I drone on about. If you ever come to my workshops, I will always talk about this. I reckon when I'm writing something for publication, I probably spend no more than 1/3 of my time actually writing, but then 2 times more, 2/3 of my time editing and polishing what I've written. And I would really encourage you to think of it like that. In many ways, the writing bit is the easy bit, and it's going back to it and making sure that every word counts. So I would really encourage you to do that. Now, what I was going to do now was just ask Jane whether there's any questions. I'm not going to mute Jane. Whether there's any questions anybody's asked that we should try and cover.
No, we haven't had any questions as such. We've had lots of lovely things being posted that people have written. I don't mind reading out a couple of those if you would like me to.
Probably we've got time for a couple. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. I'm not going to say whose they are. I'm just going to literally just read them out. And it won't be everybody's. The rumble and grind of the traffic, like giants gargling pebbles, but the birdsong surpasses it all. The rattling magpie, reedy robin, tuneful blackbird, a mob of electronic starlings, but I win, I outsing them all, a tiny ping pong ball of mouse brown with a machine gun call. I am here. So I love that. I love the giants gargling pebbles. That's brilliant. Another quickie. Let's see if I can have someone else. Before even the first rumble of the tube, their presence breaks the silence. Robin first, sharp and insistent, like a cat that has been shut out all night. Then blackbird, sharp and insistent, the garden militia. I smile as the first brush of sunlight takes the chill off my sleep-worn face, but not for long. The scent of crushed bluebells cloys my nostrils and makes me sneeze. Springtime, I guess.
Lovely. Wonderful. So, and I can see there's loads more fantastic writing there. So what next? Well, if you've enjoyed doing that writing today and you'd like your piece of thumbnail nature writing on the subject of the frantic clamour of spring to be considered for a collaborative, a published collaborative piece, so which essentially is would be published on the London Wildlife Trust blog, then please polish, edit, polish, and send your final version, which must be no more than 50 words, to me at that email address. So it's your chance to, if you want to do this, get my email address written down somewhere. And I will need them to be able to curate it. I will need them by midnight tomorrow. So Sunday, the 18th of April, Greenwich Mean Time. So hopefully that, for our friends on the other side of the Atlantic, hopefully that time works for you. And I would really encourage you, I think that the art of thumbnail nature, and the people who get it absolutely right, and there's some amazing writers, particularly on Twitter. I follow a wonderful writer called Nicola Chester who does amazing thumbnail nature, and it just seems to pour from her. But you really have a sense that every single word, every one of those 50 words matters. Nothing is there unnecessarily. So I would really encourage you to look at your piece of writing like that. And so those of you who have posted your writing already, come back to it tomorrow morning or at some point tomorrow, read it through again with fresh eyes and be absolutely sure that every word in there is the right word and the word that should be there. And then it would be lovely to see as many of those as possible. Depending on how many we get, I might not be able to include all of them, but I will try and include as many as I can. And one question we have had is whether my slides can be shared. Yes, absolutely. I have no problem with that at all. And just to give you advance notice, there are going to be more workshops like this. We're trying to get a date fixed at the moment for one in June. So they will be roughly bi-monthly, so every other month intervals, and very much of this format, but with a different theme, which we'll try and tie into the season, which I'm afraid will probably be the season in this country. But and it would be lovely if some of you came back. So just a sort of final message from me, which is please keep on nature writing. And I don't know, I think we've got a little bit of time. So Jane, are there another couple that you could read out for us before we finish off?
Yes, and I also wanted to say that somebody has written that they came to one of your other workshops and they started doing a short nature piece every day, and numbered it, and they're now on day 124. So I think that's brilliant.
That's fantastic.
And I congratulate them for being able to keep it going for that long.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, let me read a couple of other ones. So I haven't read this one yet, so I'll just read it out straight away. Popping lilies herald the spring, 3 bunches, a pop-up book, escaped deer, forsythia bloom, a yellow cloud, a bright yellow, not lemon, mustard or marigold, typical forsythia yellow. Have a plant, milkweed, order a purple, Martin birdhouse, facilitate nature's survival, breathe pure oxygen in and out. So that's lovely. I love the forsythia bloom, a yellow cloud, a bright yellow, not lemon, mustard or marigold, just a typical forsythia yellow. And I like that. It's not sort of, you know, it's saying what it is, what's on the tin. Oh, somebody has asked whether you're accepting haikus.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure that haikus wouldn't be more than 50 words from my limited knowledge of them. So yeah, absolutely. As long as it's less than 50 words. In the past, we've had poems, fiction, non-fiction. So we're very much a broad church in terms of what we've included. And if you do want to look at the previous curated thumbnail nature, it's on the London Wildlife Trust blog, and it's called If This Tree Could Talk. So you can see what people said to last time, and they were amazing. We were blown away.
So I've got a couple of other ones I can read out. Swallows in spring, swallows sweep, swooping, sailing by sunshine, rays of hope and light beam through my window, nuzzled in eaves, nests of fledglings learning to fly. That's lovely. We've got another one here. A symphony of song erupts from the boughs, beginning with the beat of the woodpecker's percussive drum. Crows cronk, a rhythmic bass line alongside the tinkling triangle of the goldcrest. Accompanying the glorious melodies and harmonies of the redbreast culminates in a crescendo at dawn. The wood pigeons clap their rapturous applause. So there's some brilliant writing. I mean, gosh, I so wish that I could write as quickly as all of you are. And if there are some of you out there that haven't been able to write as quickly as this, then I'm with you, because I take forever to write things and I have to come back to things again and again. Can you accept art or photographs to illustrate the writing? Amanda, question for you. Oh, you're on mute, Amanda.
So yes, absolutely. It would be lovely to see photographs. I can't promise we'll be able to include them all, so as long as you're not offended if we can't squeeze them all in. But fantastic, and thank you so much for all your nice feedback. It's been a pleasure doing this. We love it. So
yes, thank you.
And hopefully you'll be able to come back next time. Brilliant. So we're going to sign off there. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Jane, for that excellent session. And thank you to everybody for attending. You'll receive a post-event email soon, and we'd appreciate it if you'd fill that in, because it helps to evaluate the session and helps us to evaluate the festival overall. But that should be coming to you shortly. And I think there's links in there as well for further information about the Great North Wood. Thank you once again for celebrating the Great North Wood with us. And I hope you have a really pleasant afternoon and evening. Thanks very much. Bye.